Can't you ever stay calm?
The street was old, narrow, and full of small stories that no one really noticed. Cracked walls, rusted gates, children's chalk drawings fading on the pavement. Life happened quietly there. At the corner house, an old woman named Nabila lived alone with two cats. One was soft gray with bright eyes. His name was Rumi. The other, smaller and cream-colored, was Layla. They were both strays once, but she had taken them in when they started sleeping on her doorstep one winter. Every morning, Nabila opened the door and poured milk into a chip bowl for them. They followed her everywhere, to the kitchen, the courtyard, even when she prayed. The cats had become her family. One evening, a storm rolled through the neighborhood. The wind blew dust into every corner, and the sky rumbled for hours. When it finally cleared, the sound of whimpering echoed from near the gate. Nabila opened the door with her lantern and saw a small dog, thin, muddy, shivering. Its fur was matted, and one paw was bleeding. It looked up at her with quiet eyes, too tired to bark. "Oh, poor thing," she whispered. Rumi and Layla stood behind her, tails stiff, watching with suspicion. She brought the dog inside, cleaned its wound, and wrapped it in a towel near the stove. The cats didn't move. They sat near the corner, watching the stranger with glowing eyes. The dog closed his eyes, exhausted, and slept. By morning, he was awake, cautious but gentle. Nabila smiled and gave him bread soaked in milk. When he wagged his tail for the first time, she laughed. "You'll be fine," she said softly. "We'll call you Sheru." From that day on, everything changed. The cats hated the new guest. Sheru's smell filled the house, sharp, unfamiliar. Rumi hissed every time the dog came near the mat where he liked to nap. Layla refused to eat from her bowl if Sheru had sniffed it first. The dog tried to stay calm, but he was clumsy and loud. His tail knocked over vases, his paws left prints on the floor, and every time he barked, both cats ran to the roof. Nabila tried to make peace between them. "You're all mine," she told them, "so you must learn to live together." But animals don't learn from words, only from kindness and time. One afternoon, when Nabila went to buy groceries, Sheru followed her, as usual. Halfway down the street, a motorcycle sped past, startling him. He darted into an alley and didn't return. Nabila called for hours, her voice cracking in the wind, but there was no answer. When she came home, Rumi and Layla were waiting at the door, rubbing against her legs as if to comfort her. Days passed, and still no sign of Sheru. Then, on the fourth night, just before dawn, faint scratching echoed from the gate. Nabila hurried outside. There he was, limping, muddy again but alive. She knelt, crying softly, and brought him in. The cats watched from the doorway as she cleaned his wound once more, whispering words of relief. Maybe it was that night that changed something. The next morning, Rumi didn't hiss when Sheru passed by. Layla, cautious but curious, sniffed at the towel where the dog slept. When he wagged his tail gently, she didn't run. She simply sat there, watching. Over the next few weeks, the tension began to fade. The cats realized he wasn't a threat. Sheru learned to walk slower when they were near. Sometimes, when the sun fell into the courtyard, all three of them could be found stretched out in the same patch of light. Not touching, but not far apart either. The neighbors noticed. "Your animals live like a small family," one woman said. Nabila smiled and replied, "They're learning from each other. Patience." But the peace didn't last forever. One hot afternoon, when Nabila was hanging clothes outside, the sound of barking filled the street. A group of stray dogs had wandered in, fighting over food near her gate. Sheru ran out before she could stop him, barking furiously to defend his home. The fight was loud and quick. When the strays finally ran off, Sheru stood trembling, his ear bleeding. He limped back toward the courtyard and collapsed under the tree. The cats approached slowly. Layla sniffed his paw, Rumi circled him once, and then, surprisingly, lay down beside him. Layla followed. Both of them stayed close, their bodies pressed to his side through the long, hot afternoon. Nabila wept quietly as she cleaned the wound again, whispering prayers. Sheru healed slowly, But something unspoken had changed. The house felt united now. From then on, they moved like a team. When Nabila opened the door in the morning, all three followed her to the yard. When she prayed, they sat nearby, quiet and still. If a stranger passed too close to the gate, Shara barked, and Rumi's first stood on end, ready to defend. Layla always stayed nearest to Nabila, her soft eyes watching everything. The seasons passed. The old woman grew weaker. Some days, she couldn't get out of bed, and the animals would gather near her feet, keeping her warm. One winter night, she didn't wake up at all. The neighbors came, carried her away gently, and closed the door behind them. The house felt silent afterward. For days, no one came to feed them. The bowls were empty. The wind whistled through the cracks. But the animals didn't leave. Sheru guarded the door, Rumi prowled around the rooms, and Layla sat on the windowsill, watching the road as if expecting her to return. A young man from the neighborhood finally took pity and began leaving food near the gate. They survived together. Shara grew older, slower. The cats learned to hunt a little when food was scarce. They never separated. Wherever one went, the others followed, a strange trio that no one in the town quite understood. One evening, years later, the same young man who fed them saw them sleeping together under the tree. The light from the sunset spilled over their fur, turning everything golden. Sheru's head rested between the two cats, both curled against him like old friends. It was peaceful, so peaceful that for a long time, he didn't want to disturb them. When he came closer, he realized Sheru wasn't breathing. The cats stayed still, not leaving his side even as night fell. They stayed like that until morning, quiet and unmoving. When the man buried Sheru under the old neem tree, both cats sat near the grave for hours. Then, when the sun rose again, they walked back into the house together, slow, calm, and silent. People say they still live there, Rumi and Layla, sleeping in the same patch of sunlight near the door. Sometimes, at dusk, they can be seen sitting beside the tree where the dog rests, their eyes following the wind as if waiting for someone. And when the wind blows softly through the street, carrying the smell of earth and old stories, it almost sounds like a quiet bark echoing far away, gentle, familiar, and full of memory.